The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of Miller's General Store, and Alara Quinn stepped down into a cloud of copper-red dust that seemed to hang in the air like a warning. Her boots hit the ground with a soft thud, and immediately she felt it, the weight of eyes. Not curiosity, assessment. She straightened her shoulders and adjusted the worn carpet bag at her side, refusing to show the exhaustion that had settled into her bones after 3 days of rattling across territory that seemed determined to shake the hope out of anyone foolish enough to cross it. Copper Hollow spread before her like a collection of weathered bones. Wooden buildings bleached by sun and scoured by wind, their paint peeling in long strips that curled like dead skin. A woman in a faded calico dress stood outside the mercantile, one hand shading her eyes, the other resting on the shoulder of a child who stared with the blunt fascination of youth. Two men leaned against a hitching post, their conversation dying mid-sentence as they turned to look. Alara had seen this before. Small towns wore their suspicion like armor. "You the seamstress?" The woman's voice carried across the dusty street, not quite friendly but not hostile either. "I am." Alara walked toward her, each step deliberate. "Alara Quinn, Mr. Donovan at the boarding house said I could find fabric and thread here." "Margaret Sutton." The woman's handshake was brief, practical. "You'll want to talk to my husband inside. He keeps the dry goods." Her gaze traveled over Alara's travel-stained dress, the careful mending at the cuffs, the absence of any jewelry except a simple wooden pin at her collar. "Boarding house, you said? Not staying with family?" "No family here. I'm starting fresh." Something flickered in Margaret's expression. Recognition, maybe, or pity. "Well, Copper Hollow's as good a place as any for that, I suppose, long as you're careful about the company you keep." The warning landed soft but unmistakable. "I'm generally careful about most things," Alara said, keeping her voice level, "but I prefer to make my own judgments." Margaret's mouth tightened at the corners. "Suit yourself? But you'll hear things soon enough. Might as well hear them straight." She glanced at the men by the hitching post, then lowered her voice. "There's a man works out at the Triple Creek Ranch, foreman there. Name's Rowan Hale." Alara waited. "He's... well..." Margaret shifted her weight, uncomfortable now. "He's not right. Got himself involved with Grace Holbrook a few years back before she married Samuel. She'd never speak ill of anyone, but after they parted ways, word got around. He couldn't... that is, he wasn't able to..." She trailed off, color rising in her cheeks. "Wasn't able to what?" "Be a proper husband, if you understand my meaning." Alara understood perfectly. She'd heard variations of this story before, in other towns, about other men. The details changed, but the cruelty didn't. Someone's pride got wounded, and suddenly a man's entire worth got reduced to whispered speculation and knowing looks. "And you believe this?" Alara asked. Margaret blinked. "Well, Grace wouldn't lie, or Grace wouldn't admit she lied?" The color in Margaret's face deepened. "You don't know anything about this town or these people. I'm trying to help you. Girls come here looking for husbands, and Rowan Hale has a way of... he's handsome enough, and some girls think they can fix what's broken. But you can't fix that kind of thing. Better to know now than waste your time." "I appreciate the warning," Alara said, and meant it, even if she didn't appreciate the assumptions behind it. "But I came here to work, not to find a husband." "Everyone says that." Margaret's smile was thin. Then 6 months pass, and suddenly it's all anyone thinks about, especially when the options are limited. Behind them, one of the men at the hitching post laughed, a sharp bark of sound that made Alara's spine stiffen. "Well," Margaret said, her tone shifting back to business, "fabric's inside. Tom will set you up with whatever you need. We extend credit if you're good for it." "I'm good for it." Alara spent the next hour inside Sutton's mercantile, running her fingers over bolts of cloth that ranged from practical cotton to a single roll of dark blue silk that probably hadn't sold in years. Tom Sutton was less talkative than his wife, which Alara counted as a blessing. She purchased thread, needles, a pair of sharp scissors, and enough muslin for practice work. When she mentioned she'd be taking commissions for mending and alterations, Tom nodded and said he'd spread the word. By the time she stepped back outside, the sun had shifted lower, throwing long shadows across the street. The boarding house sat 3 blocks north, A two-story structure with a sagging porch and windows that looked out onto nothing much. Mrs. Donovan, the proprietor, had promised a clean room and 2 meals a day for a price that would eat through Alara's savings in about 6 weeks. 6 weeks to build a client base. 6 weeks to prove she belonged here. She'd had less time before. The room was exactly as promised, clean, spare, and utterly impersonal. A narrow bed with an iron frame, a washstand with a chipped basin, a single window that overlooked the alley behind the building where someone had hung laundry that snapped and twisted in the constant wind. Alara set her bag on the bed and sat beside it, letting herself feel the weight of the day. 3 days of travel. A new town. Another beginning in a long line of beginnings that stretched back to a life she'd deliberately left behind. She wasn't running from scandal exactly. She'd been the one wronged, after all. But she'd learned that being right didn't matter much when people preferred a simpler story. And the simple story was always the same. The woman was somehow complicit, somehow deserving, somehow less than she should have been. So she'd left, and kept leaving until she found a place where her past couldn't follow. Maybe Copper Hollow would be that place. Or maybe it would just be another stop along the way. The next morning, Alara woke to the sound of horses and voices drifting up from the street. She dressed quickly, pinned her dark hair into a simple knot, and went downstairs to the dining room where Mrs. Donovan served breakfast to her boarders. There were 4 others at the table, 2 ranch hands who ate in silence, a traveling salesman who talked enough for all of them, and a school teacher named Miss Brennan who looked to be about Alara's age and offered a cautious smile. "You're the seamstress," Miss Brennan said. It wasn't a question. Word travels fast. Only thing that travels faster is gossip. Miss Brennan's smile turned wry. "I'm Catherine. I teach at the schoolhouse on the East End. If you're looking for work, half the mothers in town have children who've outgrown their clothes, growing faster than anyone can keep up. I'd appreciate any recommendations you could send my way." "I'll do that." Catherine paused, then added, "Margaret Sutton mentioned she met you yesterday." Here it comes, Alara thought. She did. Gave me the lay of the land, so to speak. Catherine's expression remained carefully neutral. "Margaret means well. She's just protective. This town's been through some rough years. People tend to close ranks. Against outsiders. Against change." Catherine spread butter on a piece of toast with deliberate precision. "And against anything that disrupts the stories they've decided to believe." Alara studied the schoolteacher more carefully. There was something in her tone, not quite sympathy, but understanding. The recognition of someone who'd also learned to navigate the gap between truth and accepted narrative. "Did she warn you about Rowan Hale?" Catherine asked quietly. "She did." "And?" "And I don't base my opinions on gossip." Catherine's smile widened, genuine this time. "Good. Then you'll get along fine here, as long as you're willing to weather some cold shoulders. I've weathered worse." After breakfast, Alara spent the morning setting up her workspace in her room. It wasn't ideal. The light from the single window was weak, and she'd need to invest in better lamps, but it would do for now. She'd barely finished arranging her supplies when Mrs. Donovan knocked on the door. "Lady downstairs asking for you, says she has mending." The lady turned out to be Mrs. Howell, the banker's wife, who handed over an armful of shirts and dresses with torn hems and missing buttons. "I heard you're reasonable," she said, in a tone that suggested reasonable meant cheap. "I'll need these by Friday." It was Tuesday. Alara named her price, not cheap, but fair, and Mrs. Howell's mouth pursed. The last seamstress charged half that. "The last seamstress isn't here anymore." A long pause. Then Mrs. Howell nodded sharply. "Friday, then. Don't disappoint me." By Wednesday afternoon, Alara had 4 more clients and enough work to keep her busy through the following week. It wasn't prosperity, but it was a start. She worked late into the evening, her needle flashing in the lamplight, her fingers moving through the familiar rhythms that had become both livelihood and meditation. Thursday morning brought rain, a sudden, violent storm that turned the streets to mud and kept most people indoors. Alara used the time to finish Mrs. Howell's mending and start on a dress alteration for the doctor's daughter. She was measuring a hem when she heard horses outside, the sound of hooves splashing through puddles. She glanced out the window. A group of men on horseback had gathered in front of the boarding
This story
house,
was posted on the
rain
channel The
streaming off
Rusty
their hat
Saddle.
brims.
Please do not
Ranch
repost
hands,
it in
by
any
the look of
form.
them, probably seeking shelter or a hot meal. But one of them sat different in his saddle, straighter, more controlled. His attention focused on something down the street rather than on his companions. Even through the rain-streaked glass, Ilar could tell he was tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair curling slightly where it touched his collar. One of the other men said something, and the tall man turned his head slightly. For just a moment, his gaze swept across the boarding house windows. Ilara stepped back instinctively, though she doubted he could see her. The men rode on, disappearing around the corner toward the livery. She returned to her work, but something about that brief glimpse stayed with her. The way he'd held himself. The quality of stillness that suggested not calm, but control. Discipline. Friday morning, she delivered Mrs. Howell's mending. Perfectly done, every stitch tight and even. Mrs. Howell inspected each piece with the thoroughness of someone expecting to find fault, and grudgingly admitted the work was acceptable. She paid Ilara's fee without comment and left. Ilara counted the money twice, allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, then folded it carefully into her cash box. Progress. That afternoon, Catherine Brennan stopped by with a basket of apples and an invitation. There's a community gathering tomorrow evening at the church. Nothing fancy, just supper and socializing. It's a good way to meet people. If you're interested. Ilara hesitated. Church gatherings meant questions, polite interrogations disguised as friendly conversation. Where are you from? What brought you here? Any family? Any prospects? But it also meant visibility, integration, the difference between being the new seamstress and being part of the community. I'll be there, she said. Catherine's smile was warm. Good. Fair warning, the ladies will circle like hawks. Everyone wants to know your story. I'll try to make it boring. Somehow, I doubt you'll succeed. The church stood at the north end of town, a simple wooden structure with a bell tower that leaned slightly to the left. By the time Ilara arrived Saturday evening, the main room was already crowded with families, the air thick with the smell of fried chicken and fresh bread. She'd worn her best dress, a deep green cotton with modest trim, carefully pressed. Her hair was pinned up, her hands scrubbed clean of thread and fabric dye. She looked, she hoped, both respectable and unremarkable. The hope lasted approximately 3 minutes. You must be Miss Quinn. A woman in her 50s descended on Ilara with the focused intensity of a general surveying new troops. I'm Loretta Hayes. My husband runs the land office. We've been so curious about you. Have you? Ilara kept her tone pleasant. Oh, yes. It's so rare we get new blood in Copper Hollow, especially unmarried young women. Loretta's gaze was bright, assessing. You must have family somewhere, though. Parents? Brothers? No family, Ilara said. A simple truth that invited no follow-up. Loretta's expression shifted to practiced sympathy. Oh, you poor dear, all alone in the world. Well, you'll find Copper Hollow very welcoming, very close-knit. Close-knit. The kind of phrase that could mean community or suffocation, depending on how well you fit the mold. Other women joined them, Mrs. Patterson, whose husband owned the feed store, Mrs. Chen, who ran the laundry, Sarah Holbrook, who introduced herself with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Holbrook, as in Grace Holbrook. My sister-in-law mentioned you'd arrived, Sarah said. Grace Holbrook, married to my brother Samuel. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting her yet. Oh, you will. She's very active in the community, Sarah paused delicately. Very particular about maintaining standards. The conversation continued in that vein, surface pleasantries layered over careful probing. Where had Ilara trained? Who had taught her? What were her plans, her intentions? Ilara answered with practiced vagueness, offering just enough truth to satisfy curiosity without revealing anything that mattered. She was almost relieved when Reverend Matthews called everyone to the tables. Supper was a communal affair, long tables laden with contributed dishes, families crowding together on benches, children darting between adults with the reckless energy of youth. Alara found herself seated between Catherine and an older man who introduced himself as Mr. Brennan, Catherine's father. Teacher and seamstress, he said, nodding at them both. Two of the most important professions in any town. One shapes minds, the other keeps us decent. I'll settle for keeping people's buttons attached, Alara said. Mr. Brennan laughed. Modest and practical. You'll do well here, Miss Quinn, long as you don't mind the gossip. Does anyone actually mind gossip, or do they just pretend to? Depends on whether they're the subject or the audience. He speared a piece of chicken with his fork. You'll be the subject for a while. New arrival, young, unmarried. People will speculate. Best to just let them tire themselves out. How long does that usually take? Depends how interesting you are, or how interesting you make yourself. Across the table, Sarah Holbrook was watching her with that same too-bright smile. Alara focused on her plate. After supper, people drifted into smaller groups. Men gathered near the door, talking crops and cattle prices. Women clustered around the dessert table, their voices rising and falling in familiar rhythms. Children played in the yard outside, their shouts filtering through the open windows. Alara was helping clear plates when she heard it, a name carried on the tail end of a conversation. Hale's crew brought in 50 head yesterday. Good stock, from what I heard. Rowan knows cattle, I'll give him that. That's about all you can give him. Low laughter. Alara's hand stilled on the stack of plates she was carrying. Now, Frank, the second voice was mock chiding. No call for that kind of talk. Man can't help what he is. What he isn't, you mean. More laughter, meaner this time. Alara set the plates down harder than she'd intended. The sound drew attention. Several heads turned her direction. She met their gazes steadily, letting them see she'd heard. The conversation shifted, suddenly awkward. She carried the plates to the washing station and found Catherine there, her sleeves rolled up, hands in soapy water. Don't mind them, Catherine said quietly. They're idiots. Are they wrong? About Rowan? Catherine scrubbed at a plate with unnecessary force. I don't know. I doubt they know either, but it makes them feel better to believe it. Why? Catherine was silent for a moment. Because Rowan Hale is everything they're not. He's better at his work, better with horses, better looking, if we're being honest. And he doesn't need their approval, so they found the one thing they could use against him, and they've been using it ever since. The thing Grace Holbrook said. Grace Holbrook implied. There's a difference. Catherine rinsed the plate and set it aside. I don't know what happened between them, but I know Grace married Samuel 3 months after she and Rowan parted ways, and I know she made sure everyone knew it wasn't her choice to end things. Protecting her reputation, at the cost of his. Alara picked up a towel and started drying. Has he ever defended himself? Never, not once. Just keeps his head down and does his work. Catherine handed her another plate, which somehow makes it worse. People think his silence is admission. Or dignity. Catherine glanced at her. Most people here don't recognize the difference. They worked in silence for a while. The familiar rhythm of wash and dry, stack and repeat. Around them, the gathering continued, conversations rising and falling, children's laughter, the scrape of chairs on wooden floors. When the last plate was clean, Catherine dried her hands and turned to Alara. Can I give you some advice? Please. Whatever you're thinking, don't. Alara smiled. I'm not thinking anything. You're a terrible liar. Catherine's expression was serious now. I saw your face when those men were talking. I know that look. It's the same look I get when someone dismisses a student because of where they're from or what their parents do. But this isn't a classroom, Alara. You can't fix this. I'm not trying to fix anything. Good. Because Rowan Hale's problems are his own. And if you make them yours, this town will eat you alive. The warning was clear, well meant. Alara nodded slowly. I appreciate your concern, but you're going to do what you want anyway. I'm going to form my own opinions, that's all. Catherine sighed. Then at least be smart about it. Don't give them ammunition. Sunday morning, Alara skipped church. She told herself it was because she needed to work. She had 3 new commissions and a deadline looming. But the truth was simpler. She needed space from the weight of all those watching eyes. She worked through the morning and into the afternoon, her fingers moving steadily through fabric and thread. By evening, her back ached and her eyes burned, but she'd finished 2 complete alterations and made good progress on the third. She was just setting down her needle when she heard it. Hoofbeats, moving fast, followed by shouts. She went to the window.
This story was posted on the channel The Rusty Saddle. Please do not repost it in any form.
Wild-eyed and panicked, while a crowd gathered at a careful distance. The rider, a young man, barely more than a boy, sat in the mud, clutching his arm. Someone needed to catch that horse before it hurt itself, or someone else. Alara watched 3 men try and fail, their movements too aggressive, too loud. The horse shied away from each attempt, its fear escalating. Then another rider appeared, moving fast but controlled. He swung down from his saddle in one fluid motion and approached the panicked horse with his hands low, his voice a steady murmur Alara couldn't hear through the glass. The horse's ears flicked toward him. He kept talking, kept moving, not toward the horse, but parallel to it, giving it space while gradually narrowing its options. No sudden movements, no loud commands, just patience and certainty. The horse settled. Not immediately, but gradually, its breathing slowing, its weight shifting back from fight to wary stillness. The man stepped closer. The horse allowed it. He gathered the reins with careful hands, ran his palm along the animal's neck, checked its legs for injury. The entire sequence took maybe 2 minutes, but it was 2 minutes of complete competence. Someone in the crowd said something. Alara caught the gesture more than the words. The man replied without looking up from the horse. Then he handed the reins to one of the onlookers and moved to check on the fallen rider. Alara recognized him then. The tall man from Thursday, the one she'd seen through the rain. He helped the boy to his feet, examined his arm with the same careful attention he'd given the horse, and said something that made the boy nod. Then he collected his own mount and rode off, leaving the crowd behind. The whole incident had taken perhaps 5 minutes. Alara stood at the window longer than necessary, thinking about what she'd just witnessed, about competence, control, the kind of quiet confidence that didn't need announcement. Monday morning, she made a decision. She found Tom Sutton at his store and asked a simple question. If I wanted to hire someone to deliver a message to the Triple Creek Ranch, who would I ask? Tom's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. That's 10 miles out. You'd need a rider. Billy Jensen usually runs errands for folks. I can send him by. I'd appreciate it. Billy turned out to be the same young man who'd been thrown from his horse the previous day. His arm was bandaged, but he was mobile, and he agreed to carry Alara's message for a reasonable fee. The message was simple. Miss Alara Quinn requests the pleasure of Mr. Rowan Hale's company for coffee at Miller's Cafe, Wednesday at 2 o'clock, to discuss a business matter. Formal. Professional. Impossible to misinterpret. Billy took the sealed envelope and rode out that afternoon. Tuesday passed in a haze of work and waiting. Alara told herself she didn't care whether he responded. This was curiosity, nothing more. A refusal to accept gossip as fact. A commitment to forming her own judgments. Wednesday morning, a response arrived. Miss Quinn, I will attend. R.H. No elaboration, no questions. Alara read it twice, then carefully folded it and tucked it into her work basket. At 1:30 Wednesday afternoon, she put on her green dress, pinned her hair carefully, and walked to Miller's Cafe. The cafe was a small establishment attached to the side of the hotel. 6 tables, a counter, and windows that looked out onto Main Street. Alara chose a table in the back corner, ordered coffee, and waited. At precisely 2 o'clock, Rowan Hale walked through the door. He was taller than she'd realized, broad through the shoulders but lean, the kind of build that came from work rather than leisure. Dark hair, dark eyes, a face that would have been handsome except for the careful blankness of his expression. He saw her immediately and crossed the room with long, purposeful strides. Miss Quinn. His voice was lower than she'd expected, rougher. Mr. Hale, thank you for coming. He removed his hat and sat across from her, his movements economical. Your message said you had business to discuss. I do. Alara folded her hands on the table. But first I should be honest. I don't actually have any business. I wanted to meet you. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Not surprise exactly, maybe resignation. I see. He started to rise. Then I won't waste your time. Please. Alara kept her voice quiet. I'm not here to satisfy curiosity or confirm gossip. I'm here because I've listened to people talk about you for a week, and I realized I'd rather form my own opinion. He studied her for a long moment. Why? Because I know what it's like when people decide who you are before you've said a word. Something flickered across his face, recognition maybe, or pain. He sat back down. Elara signaled the waitress for another coffee. When it arrived, she wrapped her hands around her cup and met his gaze directly. I'm not going to ask you to defend yourself or explain anything. I don't think I have that right. But I wanted you to know that not everyone in this town accepts gossip as truth. Most do. His voice was flat, matter of fact. I'm not most people. No. He studied her with the same careful attention he'd given the panicked horse. I can see that. They sat in silence for a moment. Elara sipped her coffee. Rowan's cup remained untouched on the table. Why are you really here? He asked finally. I told you. You told me what you wanted me to hear. I'm asking what's actually true. Elara considered him. The directness of the question, the intelligence behind it. All right, she said. The truth is I'm tired of small towns with small minds. I'm tired of people who think they know everything about someone based on whispers and assumptions. And I'm tired of keeping my head down and pretending I don't see injustice. This isn't your fight. Maybe not, but I'm choosing to care anyway. Rowan's jaw tightened. That choice will cost you. Let me worry about that. He picked up his coffee finally, drank half of it in one long swallow, then set the cup down carefully. You don't know what you're doing. Probably not, but I've never let that stop me before. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. They talked for an hour. Not about the rumors, not about Grace Holbrook or town gossip or any of the things that mattered most. They talked about horses. He knew them the way some people knew books. About the ranch, the rhythms of the work, the satisfaction of it. About Copper Hollow, its stubborn resistance to change. Elara talked about sewing, about the meditation of repetitive work, about the quiet pride of making something fit properly, of taking fabric and thread and creating something useful. When she mentioned she'd seen him handle the panicked horse on Sunday, his expression shifted. Surprise that she'd noticed, then something else. Pleasure, maybe, at being seen for his competence rather than his supposed failings. That boy has no business riding, he said, but his father insists. Pride. The father's or the son's? Both. At 3:30 he stood. I need to get back. Of course. Elara stood as well. He picked up his hat, turned it in his hands. Thank you for the coffee, Miss Quinn. Elara, and you're welcome. Rowan, he settled his hat on his head. People will talk about this. Let them. He studied her for a moment longer, then nodded once and left. Elara sat back down and finished her coffee slowly, aware that every eye in the cafe had been on them. Aware that by tomorrow morning, the entire town would know she'd met privately with Rowan Hale. She'd told Catherine she wasn't trying to fix anything. She'd lied. Not about Rowan. She couldn't fix a reputation built on lies and sustained by cruelty. But she could refuse to participate in it. And sometimes, refusal was its own kind of power. The news spread faster than wildfire in dry grass. By Thursday morning, Elara had 3 clients cancel their orders. No explanations offered, just terse messages delivered through Mrs. Donovan, who handed them over with a pinched expression that said more than words could. People talk, was all she said. Elara folded the cancellation notes and set them aside. Let them. But the truth settled in her stomach like cold stone. 3 clients meant nearly a week's income, gone. Her savings wouldn't last forever, and Copper Hollow wasn't large enough to sustain a seamstress that half the town refused to patronize. She'd known there would be consequences, she just hadn't expected them quite so fast. Friday brought a different kind of message. Catherine stopped by during her lunch break, her face tight with something between concern and frustration. You need to be more careful, she said without preamble. Elara set down the dress she'd been hemming. About what? About being seen with Rowan Hale in public. About... Catherine stopped, shook her head. Grace Holbrook came by the school yesterday, asked me questions about you, where you're from, what your intentions are. My intentions toward what? Toward her former... Catherine trailed off. She didn't say it directly. She never does. But the implication was clear enough. Alara's hand stilled on the fabric. And what did you tell her? That you're a seamstress who minds her own business. That you've been nothing but professional
This
since
story
you
was
arrived.
posted on the channel
Catherine's
The
voice
Rusty
softened.
Saddle. Please do
But
not
Alara,
repost it
Grace
in any
has
form.
influence in this town. Her husband owns the largest cattle operation next to Triple Creek. If she decides you're a problem, then I'm a problem. Alara picked up her needle again. I appreciate the warning, Catherine, truly, but I won't apologize for having coffee with someone. It's not about apologizing. It's about surviving. Catherine moved closer, lowered her voice. You don't understand how these things work here. Grace didn't just spread rumors about Rowan. She made sure they became truth. The kind of truth that doesn't need proof because everyone already wants to believe it. Why? Alara met her friend's eyes. Why does everyone want to believe the worst about him? Catherine was quiet for a moment. Because believing it makes their own mediocrity feel acceptable. Rowan's better than most of the men in this town, and they know it. So when Grace gave them permission to dismiss him, to reduce him to something less than them, they took it, gladly. That's disgusting. That's people, Catherine sighed. Look, I'm not saying don't see him. I'm saying be smart about it. Don't give them more ammunition than they already have. After Catherine left, Alara sat in the silence of her room and considered her options. She could back away now. Stop before things got worse. Find some way to rebuild her client base and fade into the acceptable fabric of Copper Hollow life. Or she could keep going. The choice should have been harder than it was. Saturday morning, she wrote another note. Brief and direct. Same place, same time, next Wednesday. If you're willing. She paid Billy Jensen to deliver it and tried not to count the hours until a response came. It arrived Sunday evening. The same economical handwriting. I'll be there. The week crawled by. Alara filled the empty hours with work she didn't have, practicing stitches and techniques she'd already mastered. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from spinning through scenarios she couldn't control. On Monday, Mrs. Howell came by with more mending, a pointed gesture, Alara thought, of either loyalty or pity. She wasn't sure which, but she took the work gratefully. On Tuesday, she ran into Margaret Sutton at the Mercantile. Margaret's greeting was cooler than before, her smile tight. I heard you've been making friends, Margaret said, measuring out thread with careful precision. I've been having coffee, Alara replied evenly. There's a difference. Not in this town. Margaret cut the thread with a sharp snap. You should know Grace Holbrook is planning a ladies' social next month. She usually invites all the unmarried women. Good opportunity to meet people. Make connections. A pause. Waited. But she's particular about who she includes. The threat was genteel, but unmistakable. Alara paid for her thread and left without responding. What was there to say? She'd already made her choice. The town would either accept it, or it wouldn't. Wednesday arrived cold and overcast, the sky pressed low and heavy with the promise of rain. Alara dressed carefully, the same green dress, her hair pinned the same way. If this was going to be a regular occurrence, she wanted to establish it as exactly that. Regular. Unremarkable. A standing appointment that deserved no more attention than any other weekly routine. She arrived at Miller's Cafe 5 minutes early. Rowan was already there, seated at the same back corner table, his hat on the chair beside him. He stood when she approached. Miss Quinn. I thought we'd agreed on Alara. Alara. He said it carefully, like he was testing the weight of the familiarity. She sat, and he followed suit. The waitress brought coffee without being asked. She'd remembered their order from the week before, which meant this was already becoming a pattern people noticed. Good. How was your week? Alara asked. Rowan's mouth twitched. Interesting. Yours? Lost 3 clients, gained 1. Was threatened politely by Margaret Sutton. Overall, could be worse. He set his cup down. You should stop this. Stop what? Having coffee? You know what I mean. I really don't. Alara met his gaze directly. I'm having coffee with someone I find interesting, that's all. That's not all. And you know it. His voice was quiet but firm. You're making a statement, drawing a line. And people on this side of the line, There aren't many of us. Maybe there should be more. Maybe. He turned his cup between his hands. But you'll pay for it. Already are paying for it. 3 clients isn't the end of the world. It's the beginning. He leaned forward slightly. This is how it starts, Ilara. First the cancellations, then the cold shoulders, then the outright exclusion. Grace Holbrook is very good at making people disappear without ever saying a word directly against them. You're still here. Barely. The admission came rough. I have my work. The ranch needs me, so Mr. Brennan tolerates the gossip. But socially, I'm a ghost. Have been for 3 years. Ilara studied him, the set of his shoulders, the careful blankness he wore like armor. Does it bother you? He was quiet for a long moment. Yes, he said finally. It bothers me that a lie can have more power than the truth, that people I've known for years would rather believe the worst than ask a single question, that my silence is taken as guilt instead of... He stopped. Instead of what? Instead of knowing that defending myself would only make it worse. He met her eyes. Grace didn't just spread rumors, she cried. Made herself the victim of my supposed inadequacy. If I'd fought back, tried to tell my side, I'd have been the man attacking a woman's reputation, calling her a liar. There was no winning move. So you said nothing? I said nothing. His jaw tightened. And watched my life narrow to the space between the ranch and my room at the boarding house. Watched friendships dissolve. Watched women I'd known since childhood cross the street to avoid me. The bitterness in his voice was earned, Ilara thought, hard-won through 3 years of isolation and judgment. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be, it's not your fault. I'm not apologizing for Grace Holbrook's lies. I'm apologizing for a town that chose to believe them. They sat in silence for a moment. Around them, the cafe continued its quiet business. The clink of cups, the murmur of other conversations, the hiss of steam from the kitchen. Tell me about your work, Ilara said finally. Not the ranch work, your real work. The things you do that no one sees. He looked at her with something like surprise. What makes you think there's anything else? Because competent people are rarely satisfied with just one thing. You handle horses like you've studied them, really studied them, not just learned through repetition. A pause. Then, I read. About horses? About everything. Animal behavior, breeding theory, range management, anything I can get my hands on. He shifted slightly, uncomfortable with the admission. The ranch owner, Mr. Brennan, Catherine's uncle, he has a library, lets me borrow books when I want. So you educate yourself. Someone has to. He shrugged. Most of the hands think ranching is just tradition. Do it the way their fathers did. But there are better methods, smarter ways to manage grazing, select breeding stock, prevent disease. I've been implementing some of them on Triple Creek. Quietly. And they work. They work. For the first time, she saw something like pride in his expression. We've increased our healthy calf rate by 15% in 2 years, cut our winter feed costs, improved our herd quality. Does Mr. Brennan know it's your doing? He knows. He's a practical man. He cares about results, not gossip. Ilara smiled. Sounds like someone else I know. The conversation shifted after that, easier than before. He told her about a difficult calving he'd managed the previous week, the satisfaction of saving both mother and calf when others had been ready to give up. She told him about the challenge of altering a dress for a client who'd gained weight but refused to admit it, the delicate balance of making adjustments without wounding pride. They talked about books. He'd read more than she expected, everything from agricultural journals to philosophy. About the land, the harsh beauty of it, the way it demanded respect. About small ambitions, her hope to eventually afford better equipment, maybe hire an apprentice. His dream of owning land someday, running his own operation. An hour passed, then another. When they finally stood to leave, Rowan settled his hat on his head and looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Same time next week? She asked. People will notice. They already have. It'll get worse. I know. She picked up her shawl. Same time next week? He nodded slowly. Same time. Outside, the threatened rain had begun, light drops that promised heavier weather later. Rowan walked her back to the boarding house, a gesture that would definitely be noticed and discussed. They didn't talk much, just walked in companionable silence through the dusty streets.
This story was posted on the channel The Rusty Saddle. Please do not repost it in any form.
Thank you for the company, Rowan. She watched him walk away, his long strides eating up the distance back toward the livery where he'd left his horse. Watched until he turned the corner and disappeared from view. When she went inside, Mrs. Donovan was waiting in the front hall, her expression troubled. "Miss Quinn, a word?" Alara's stomach tightened. "Of course." They moved to Mrs. Donovan's private sitting room, a cluttered space filled with antimacassars and fading photographs. "I want you to understand," Mrs. Donovan began, settling into her chair with a sigh, "that I run a respectable establishment. I don't judge my boarders for their friendships or their choices. But I do have a reputation to maintain." "I understand. Do you?" Mrs. Donovan's gaze was sharp. "Because I've had 3 ladies stop by this week with concerns about the company you're keeping. Not complaints, mind you, just concerns. The kind that could become complaints if things continue. Things being my weekly coffee with Mr. Hale. Among other things." Mrs. Donovan folded her hands in her lap. "I'm not asking you to end your friendship. I'm asking you to be aware that your actions reflect on this house, on me. And if enough people decide they disapprove, you'll have to ask me to leave." Alara finished the thought. "I understand, truly, and I'm sorry to put you in this position." Mrs. Donovan's expression softened slightly. "I like you, Miss Quinn. You're a hard worker and you pay on time and you don't cause trouble. But this town has a long memory and a short temper for anyone who challenges the established order. I'm just having coffee with someone. You're publicly aligning yourself with a man this town has already judged and condemned. That's not just anything." Mrs. Donovan leaned forward. "Can I ask why? What's worth risking your livelihood and your place here?" Alara considered the question. The real question beneath it, what's worth risking everything for? "Because I've been judged too," she said finally. "Not for the same reasons, but I know what it's like when people decide who you are based on rumors and assumptions instead of truth. And I know how much it costs to live under that kind of weight. If I can make that lighter for someone else, even just a little, it's worth it." Mrs. Donovan studied her for a long moment. "You're either very brave or very foolish. Can it be both?" A small smile. "I suppose it can." Mrs. Donovan stood, signaling the conversation was over. "Just be careful, dear. Bravery is admirable, but it doesn't pay the rent." That night, Alara lay awake listening to the rain drum against her window and thought about choices. About the ones she'd made and the ones still coming. About the gap between principle and survival and how narrow that gap could become. She could still back away. Stop seeing Rowan. Apologize to the right people. Make the right gestures of contrition. Save her business and her place in Copper Hollow. But she'd tried that before, in other towns. Tried making herself smaller, quieter, more acceptable. And it had never been enough. Because the problem wasn't her behavior. It was other people's need to enforce conformity, to punish anyone who refused to participate in their comfortable cruelties. So maybe the answer wasn't to bend. Maybe it was to break the pattern entirely. The next morning brought a surprise. A new client. A woman Alara had never seen before, probably in her early 60s, with iron gray hair and a direct gaze that reminded her of Mrs. Donovan. "I'm Martha Brennan," she announced, "Catherine's aunt. I heard you do good work." "I try." "I also heard you've been having coffee with my nephew's ranch foreman." Alara kept her expression neutral. "I have." Martha set a bundle of fabric on the table. "Good. Rowan Hale is worth 10 of most men in this town, and it's about time someone had the spine to say so publicly." She fixed Alara with a sharp look. "I need 3 new work dresses. Practical, well-made, nothing fancy. Can you do it?" "Yes, ma'am." "How much?" Alara named her price. Fair, not inflated, the same she'd charge anyone. Martha pulled out her coin purse and counted out half the amount. "Down payment. I'll pay the rest when they're done. And Miss Quinn, don't let the gossips run you off. This town needs more people willing to think for themselves." After she left, Alara sat with the bundle of fabric and the coins and felt something shift in her chest. Not hope, exactly, but possibility. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she'd thought. The following week settled into a pattern. Wednesday afternoons at Miller's Cafe became a fixed point in both their schedules. Sometimes they talked for an hour, sometimes two. The conversations ranged wide: books, work, the small observations that made up daily life. He told her about the ranch, the personalities of individual cattle, the challenge of managing men who resented taking orders from someone they considered beneath them. She told him about the precision required in good tailoring, the satisfaction of transforming fabric into something useful, the clients who made the work worthwhile and the ones who didn't. They didn't talk about the gossip. They both knew it was there, growing like a weed in fertile ground, but acknowledging it would give it power neither of them wanted to grant. The cost of their friendship became clearer with each passing week. Alara lost 2 more clients, both with vague excuses that barely masked the real reason. But she also gained 3 new ones, women who either didn't care about town opinion or actively opposed it. The net result left her barely breaking even, but surviving. Rowan faced his own consequences. He told her briefly about a confrontation with Samuel Holbrook at the feed store. Nothing physical, just words. Accusations thinly veiled as concern. Questions about his intentions toward that Quinn woman. Implications that he was somehow taking advantage of an innocent newcomer. "What did you say?" Alara asked. "That my friendship with you was none of his business." Rowan's jaw was tight. He didn't like that. I imagine not. He said Grace was worried about you, concerned you didn't understand the kind of man you were associating with. Alara felt anger flash hot in her chest. Grace Holbrook doesn't get to decide who I associate with. No, but she can make your life difficult. He met her gaze. This isn't going to stop, Alara. As long as we continue meeting, as long as you refuse to distance yourself from me, she'll keep pushing. She has to. Because if you don't break, it undermines everything she's built her reputation on. Then let it undermine. You say that now? I'll say it next month too. And the month after that. She leaned forward. Rowan, I'm not here because I'm naive or because I don't understand the consequences. I'm here because I choose to be, because your company is worth more to me than Grace Holbrook's approval. Something shifted in his expression, surprise bleeding into something deeper, more vulnerable. Why? Because you're intelligent and interesting and you treat me like an equal instead of a problem to be solved or a prize to be won. She held his gaze. Because in a town full of people performing who they think they should be, you're just yourself, even when it costs you. He was quiet for a long moment. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you read philosophy and animal behavior. I know you've spent 3 years enduring isolation rather than fighting back and making things worse. I know you're better at your work than most people will ever acknowledge. And I know that every Wednesday you show up here even though it costs you something each time. It costs you too. Yes, and I keep showing up anyway. She smiled slightly. We're both stubborn that way. He almost smiled back. Almost. What do you want from this? He asked. From me? It was a fair question, one she'd been asking herself. I don't know, she admitted. Friendship, certainly. Someone who understands what it's like to be judged unfairly. Beyond that? She trailed off. I haven't thought that far ahead. You should. His voice was quiet, serious. Because this town will assume the worst. They already are. And if you're not prepared for what that means, I'm prepared for people to talk. I mean more than talk. He hesitated, then continued. They'll say we're courting, that you have designs on me or I on you. They'll watch for any sign of impropriety and magnify it. And if we do decide, if this becomes more than friendship, they'll never believe it's real. They'll say you're desperate or deluded, and I'm taking advantage. Let them say it. Alara. He said her name like a warning. If we continue down this path, there's no easy retreat. The damage to your reputation will be permanent. You understand that. I understand that my reputation is already damaged simply for refusing to participate in collective cruelty. So yes, I understand. She met his eyes. Do you? Understand what? That I'm not going anywhere. That whatever this is or becomes, I'm choosing it, choosing you. and nothing Grace Holbrook or anyone else says is going to change that. The silence stretched between them, charged with something neither of them had named yet. Finally, Rowan nodded. All right. All right. All right. He picked up his coffee, drained the last cold swallow. Then I suppose we'd better give them something real to talk about. What did you have in mind? There's a dance next month, community social at the church. I haven't attended in 3 years. He set the cup down carefully. But if you'd agree to accompany me, I'd be willing to break that pattern. Alara's heart kicked against her ribs. A dance. Public. Undeniable. That's quite a statement, she said. Yes. People will lose their minds. Almost certainly. Grace Holbrook might actually spontaneously combust. The corner of his mouth twitched. One can hope? Alara laughed, surprised it out of herself. All right then. Yes.
This story was posted on the channel The Rusty Saddle. Please do not repost it in any form.
I'm sure. They sat with that decision for a moment, both aware they'd just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. When they left the cafe that afternoon, Rowan offered his arm. A small gesture, but deliberate. Public. Alara took it. They walked down Main Street in full view of anyone who cared to look, and plenty did. Alara felt the weight of attention like physical pressure, but she kept her head up, her stride steady. At the boarding house steps, Rowan released her arm and tipped his hat. Until next Wednesday. Until then. She watched him walk away, then turned to find Mrs. Donovan standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. You're really doing this, Mrs. Donovan said. Not a question. I am. The dance will be war. I know. Mrs. Donovan sighed. Then I suppose you'd better wear your best dress. If you're going to scandalize the town, might as well look good doing it. Despite everything, Alara smiled. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen what Grace Holbrook can do when she's truly threatened. But Alara had survived worse than Grace Holbrook. She'd survived betrayal and abandonment and the slow dissolution of a life she'd thought was solid. She'd survived starting over with nothing but skills and stubborn hope. She could survive this too, and maybe, just maybe, she could do more than survive. Maybe she could win. The news about the dance spread through Copper Hollow like poison in a well. By the next morning, Alara had lost another client, Mrs. Patterson, who sent her half-finished order back with a curt note saying she'd reconsidered her needs. By afternoon, 2 women had crossed the street rather than pass Alara on the sidewalk. By evening, even Catherine looked worried. Grace is hosting a tea tomorrow, Catherine said, stopping by after school, for the unmarried women in town. She's calling it a social gathering, but everyone knows what it really is. A loyalty test? Alara threaded her needle without looking up from the sleeve she was hemming. Exactly. You'll be invited. And if you don't go, I'm openly choosing Rowan over her approval. And if you do go, she'll make an example of you in front of everyone. Catherine sat down heavily. There's no winning move here. Alara smiled without humor. Seems to be a theme in this town. The invitation arrived that evening, delivered by hand. Cream-colored paper, elegant script, Grace Holbrook's name embossed at the top. You are cordially invited to tea at the Holbrook residence Saturday at 2 o'clock. Please confirm your attendance. Alara stared at it for a long time. She could decline, claim prior commitments, a sudden illness, anything. Or she could accept and walk directly into whatever Grace had planned. Or she could do something else entirely. She wrote her response carefully. Thank you for the invitation. I'll be delighted to attend. Then she went to find Martha Brennan. Martha lived in a neat house on the east side of town, surrounded by a garden that was thriving despite the harsh climate. She answered the door with flour on her hands and curiosity in her eyes. Miss Quinn, this is unexpected. I need advice, Alara said, and possibly backup. Martha wiped her hands on her apron. Come in. I'll put coffee on. They sat at Martha's kitchen table while bread dough rose under a cloth nearby. Alara explained about the invitation, about Grace's obvious intentions, about the impossible position she'd been put in. So you need to know how to handle Grace Holbrook, Martha said when she'd finished, without either backing down or giving her ammunition. Is that possible? Depends on how brave you are. Martha poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs. Grace's power comes from 2 things, her husband's money, and her carefully maintained image as the wronged woman. She presents herself as gracious and forgiving while making sure everyone knows exactly how much she's suffered at Rowan's hands. If you challenge her directly, you look cruel. If you submit, you validate everything she said. So what's the third option? You go to that tea, you're polite, gracious, completely proper. And when she tries to corner you, because she will, you refuse to engage with her narrative. Don't defend Rowan. Don't attack her. Just make it clear that her opinion on the matter is irrelevant to your choices. That sounds harder than it is. It is hard. Grace is very good at what she does. Martha leaned forward. But she's not used to people who won't play her game. She expects you to either cower or fight. If you do neither, it throws her off balance. And if that doesn't work? Martha's smile was sharp. Then you'll have me there as backup. I've been wanting an excuse to put Grace Holbrook in her place for 3 years. You just gave me one. Saturday arrived cold and bright. Alara dressed in her green dress, the same one she wore for coffee with Rowan, which felt like its own small defiance. She pinned her hair carefully, checked her reflection, and tried to ignore the nervous flutter in her stomach. Martha met her outside the Holbrook house, wearing her Sunday best and an expression that suggested she was looking forward to the afternoon's entertainment. "Ready?" Martha asked. "Not even slightly." "Good. Means you're smart enough to be scared." Martha linked her arm through Alara's. "Let me do the talking if things get ugly. I'm old enough to get away with saying what younger women can't." The Holbrook house was the largest in Copper Hollow. 2 stories of whitewashed wood with a wraparound porch and gardens that must have cost a fortune to maintain in this climate. Inside, the parlor had been arranged for the tea. Delicate furniture, fine china, fresh flowers that definitely weren't local. Grace Holbrook stood at the center of it all, the perfect hostess in a dress that probably cost more than Alara made in 3 months. She was beautiful in that careful, constructed way. Blonde hair arranged just so, skin pale and smooth, features that would photograph well but somehow lacked warmth in person. "Miss Quinn." Grace's smile was pleasant, empty. "How lovely that you could join us. And Mrs. Brennan, what a delightful surprise." "Grace." Martha's tone was cordial, nothing more. "Thank you for including me." There were 8 other women present, all unmarried, all watching Alara with varying degrees of curiosity and hostility. Sarah Holbrook, Grace's sister-in-law, sat nearest to Grace, a position that suggested alliance. Margaret Sutton had been invited too, her expression uncomfortable. The first half-hour passed in strained small talk. Grace poured tea with practiced grace, asked polite questions about everyone's week, made gentle observations about the weather and town events. She was good at this, Alara realized. Good at creating an atmosphere that felt welcoming while actually being carefully controlled. Then, as the second round of tea was being poured, Grace turned to Alara with that same pleasant smile. "Miss Quinn, I've been meaning to speak with you about something." Her voice was soft, concerned. "Several of my friends have mentioned seeing you around town with someone I used to know quite well. I wanted to make sure you understand the situation." Every conversation in the room stopped. All eyes turned toward Alara. "I'm not sure what situation you're referring to," Alara said, keeping her voice level. "Rowan Hale." Grace's expression was sympathetic now, practiced. "I know he can be quite charming on the surface, and I understand you're new here, so you might not realize—" "I realize quite a bit, actually." Alara set down her teacup carefully. "I realize that Mr. Hale is an intelligent, hardworking man who's been judged based on gossip rather than evidence. And I realize that I enjoy his company." Sarah Holbrook made a small sound, surprise or disapproval, hard to tell. Grace's smile never wavered. "I admire your loyalty, truly, but as someone who knew him intimately, I feel obligated to warn you. Rowan he has certain limitations, as a man, limitations that make him unsuitable for the kind of relationship I assume you're hoping for." "You assume incorrectly." Alara met Grace's eyes directly. "I'm not hoping for anything except good conversation and honest friendship, which I've found." "Friendship." Grace's laugh was soft, patronizing. "My dear, you're young and alone in a new town. It's natural to want companionship, but attaching yourself to someone like Rowan, someone who can't offer you a real future, that's just cruel. To both of you. I don't recall asking for your opinion on my friendships." The room went very quiet. Grace's expression flickered, just for a second, the pleasant mask slipping to show something harder underneath. Then it was back, smooth as ever. "I'm only trying to help," she said, "as someone who's been exactly where you are now. I thought Rowan could be the man he presented himself as. I learned otherwise. Painfully. I'd hate to see another woman go through that same disappointment." The difference,
This story was posted on the channel The Rusty Saddle. Please do not repost it in any form.
Quinn isn't looking to Rowan Hale to complete her. She's quite complete on her own, thank you. She's simply choosing to spend time with someone she finds worthwhile, a concept you might understand if you valued anything beyond social standing. Grace's teacup rattled slightly against its saucer. "Mrs. Brennan, I wasn't aware you had such strong opinions on this matter." "I have strong opinions on watching good people destroyed by lies and cowardice." Martha's smile was pleasant, deadly. "You want to talk about Rowan's limitations, Grace? Let's talk about yours, like your inability to admit when you're wrong, or your need to tear down anyone who makes you feel inadequate." "I don't know what you're suggesting. I'm suggesting that Rowan Hale ended things with you because he realized you were more interested in his prospects than in him. And instead of accepting rejection with grace, you spread vicious rumors that destroyed his reputation to salvage yours." Martha set down her cup with deliberate precision. "I'm suggesting that your entire campaign against him has been nothing but wounded pride dressed up as concern." Sarah Holbrook stood abruptly. "You can't possibly—" "Sit down, Sarah." Martha didn't even look at her. "This is between me and your sister-in-law." Grace's hands were shaking now, her composure cracking. "You don't know what you're talking about. You weren't there. You didn't—" She stopped, caught herself. "Didn't what?" Martha leaned forward. "Didn't see what happened between you two? You're right, I wasn't there. But I know Rowan Hale, have known him since he was 15 years old, and I know he's worth 10 of most men in this town, including your husband." The silence was absolute now. Even the clock on the mantel seemed to have stopped ticking. Grace stood, her face pale except for 2 spots of color high on her cheeks. "I think you should leave, Mrs. Brennan." "I think you're right." Martha stood, collected her shawl. "Coming, Miss Quinn?" Alara stood as well, her legs steadier than she'd expected. "Thank you for the tea, Mrs. Holbrook. It was very enlightening." They walked out together, leaving shocked silence behind them. Neither spoke until they were a block away from the Holbrook house. Then Martha started laughing. "Did you see her face?" Martha gasped between laughs. "When I mentioned her husband, I thought she might actually throw that teapot." Alara found herself laughing too, partly from relief, partly from the sheer absurdity of what had just happened. "You were incredible, absolutely terrifying. I want to be you when I grow up." "You're already well on your way." Martha's laughter faded to a smile. "But you should know, that wasn't the end of this. That was a declaration of war. Grace won't forgive either of us for humiliating her in front of her allies." "I know." "And you're still planning to go to that dance with Rowan?" "More than ever." Martha studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Then let's make sure you look spectacular doing it." The next 2 weeks passed in a strange suspension. Half the town seemed to be talking about the tea incident. Versions of the story multiplied and mutated with each retelling. In some versions, Martha had actually thrown something at Grace. In others, Alara had made scandalous declarations about her relationship with Rowan. The truth was dramatic enough, but Copper Hollow had never been satisfied with simple facts. Alara's client base continued to shrink. She was down to 5 regular customers now: Martha, Catherine, Mrs. Donovan, and 2 ranch wives who lived far enough outside town that gossip reached them late and mattered less. It wasn't enough to sustain her indefinitely, but it was enough for now. Wednesday afternoons remained her anchor point. She and Rowan still met at Miller's Cafe, though now they drew even more attention. People didn't bother hiding their stares anymore. Some were hostile, some were curious. A few, very few, looked almost approving. "Martha Brennan is my hero," Rowan said during their first meeting after the tea incident. "I heard she made Grace Holbrook cry." "Not quite cry, but close." Alara smiled at the memory. "Martha doesn't pull punches." "Neither do you, apparently." He studied her across the table. "Are you all right, really?" "I'm surviving, barely, but surviving." "Your business—" is hanging by a thread, I know. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. But I knew that was the cost going in. I'm not backing out now. He was quiet for a moment. You're stubborn. So are you. Yes, but I've had 3 years to get used to being an outcast. You've had 3 weeks. There's a difference. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just faster at accepting reality. She met his eyes. Rowan, I'm not doing this because I'm naive or because I think I can fix your reputation. I'm doing this because I refuse to participate in cruelty, even when it costs me. It's costing you a lot. Worth it. He shook his head, but she saw the corner of his mouth lift. You're impossible. Thank you. They talked about other things after that. He'd started reading a new book about soil conservation. She'd finished a complicated alteration that had required completely reconstructing a bodice. Normal things. The kind of conversation that would be unremarkable anywhere else, but here felt like quiet rebellion. When they stood to leave, Rowan hesitated. The dance is in 10 days. I know. You can still change your mind. If you want, I'd understand. Alara picked up her shawl. I'm not changing my mind. Are you? No? Then I'll see you there. Outside, the autumn air had turned sharp. Winter was coming early this year, people said. The kind of winter that would test everyone's preparations and patience. Rowan walked her back to the boarding house as he always did now. At the steps, he caught her hand. A brief touch, barely a second, but deliberate. Thank you, he said quietly, for not giving up. Thank you for being worth it. He released her hand and walked away. Alara watched him go, then turned to find Mrs. Donovan in the doorway again. You're really going through with this, Mrs. Donovan said. Statement, not question. I am. Grace Holbrook came by yesterday, offered to pay double your monthly rent if I'd encourage you to find other lodging. Alara's stomach dropped. What did you tell her? I told her I don't take bribes and she could kindly go to hell. Mrs. Donovan's smile was grim. But she'll try something else. She's not going to let this dance happen without a fight. Let her fight. You're confident. I'm terrified, Alara admitted. But I'm going anyway. Mrs. Donovan studied her for a long moment. Your rent's due Friday. Can you make it? The question was delicate, carefully phrased. Alara did quick mental math. With her reduced client base, she'd be short. Not by much, but enough to matter. I'll figure something out. See that you do. I can't run a charity, no matter how much I admire your principles. That night, Alara counted her money 3 times, hoping the total would change. It didn't. She was $15 short of rent, with no new commissions on the horizon and only 4 days to make up the difference. She could ask for an extension. Mrs. Donovan might grant it. She'd proven more sympathetic than Alara had expected. Or she could sell something. Her mother's wooden pin, maybe. It wasn't worth much, but it might fetch enough. Or she could do what she'd been avoiding since she arrived in Copper Hollow. She could ask for help. The next morning, she swallowed her pride and went to see Catherine. I need to borrow $15, she said without preamble. I'll pay you back within the month. With interest, if you want. Catherine set down the slate she'd been grading. What happened? Lost too many clients. Can't make rent. Simple math. Alara kept her voice steady. I understand if you can't spare it. I know teachers don't make much. Sit down. Catherine pulled out a chair. I can lend you the money, but Alara, you can't keep going like this. You're bleeding clients faster than you can replace them. If this continues... I know. I'll be out of business within a few months. So what's your plan? Alara had been asking herself the same question. I don't have one. Not beyond surviving day to day and refusing to compromise on principle. Principle doesn't pay rent. No, but it lets me sleep at night. Catherine sighed and went to retrieve her cash box. She counted out $15 and handed it over. No interest, but I want you to promise me something. What? Promise you'll think about what comes next, after the dance, after you've made your point, because martyrdom is noble, but it's also impractical. Alara took the money, feeling the weight of both the bills and the obligation. I promise. And thank you, Catherine, really. Don't thank me yet. Save it for when you've actually survived all this. Friday evening, Alara paid her rent. Mrs. Donovan took the money without comment, but her expression suggested she knew it hadn't come easy. Saturday brought a different kind of challenge. Martha Brennan appeared at the boarding house with a dress box and a determined expression. "I brought options," she announced, setting the box on Alara's bed. "You can't go to this dance looking anything less than spectacular. We're making a statement." Inside the box were 3 dresses, all clearly expensive, all in different styles. Martha must have borrowed them from someone or pulled them from storage. "Martha, I can't." "You can, and you will."
This story was posted on the channel The Rusty Saddle.
Martha held
Please
up a
do not
deep blue
repost
silk
it in
that
any
probably
form.
cost more than Alara's entire wardrobe combined. "It'll bring out your eyes." They spent the next hour trying dresses, pinning adjustments, discussing the strategic importance of appearance. The blue silk was too formal, the green cotton too plain. But the third dress, a rich burgundy with simple lines and elegant draping, that one fit like it had been made for her. "Perfect," Martha declared. "You look like someone who knows exactly what she's worth." "I look like I'm wearing a dress I can't afford." "Same thing." Martha circled her, examining the fit. "Grace Holbrook uses her appearance as armor, so will you. The difference is your armor is real confidence, not carefully constructed desperation." Alara studied herself in the small mirror. Martha was right. The dress transformed her, made her look stronger, more certain, like someone who belonged at this dance regardless of what anyone else thought. "How did you know what size to bring?" she asked. Martha smiled. "I'm a ranch wife. I can estimate the weight of a calf at birth and the yield of a hayfield from 50 yards. Guessing dress sizes is easy by comparison." The week leading up to the dance crawled and raced simultaneously. Alara worked on the few commissions she had, saved every penny, and tried not to think about what would happen at the community social. But speculation was impossible to avoid. Every time she went into town, she heard whispers, saw the looks. Wednesday afternoon, Rowan arrived at Miller's Cafe looking troubled. "What's wrong?" Alara asked as soon as he sat down. "Samuel Holbrook came out to the ranch yesterday. Had a conversation with Mr. Brennan about my conduct." Rowan's jaw was tight. "Said he was concerned about my behavior around you. Suggested I might be taking advantage of an innocent young woman." "What did Mr. Brennan say?" "Told him to mind his own business and get off his property." A muscle jumped in Rowan's cheek. "But Samuel's not finished. He's going to keep pushing until he finds some way to make trouble." "Let him push." "Alara, I'm serious. He can push all he wants. We're not doing anything wrong. We're having coffee, going to a dance, acting like adults who enjoy each other's company. If that threatens him, that's his problem, not ours." Rowan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You really don't care what they think, do you?" "I care. It would be easier if I didn't, but I'm not going to let their opinions dictate my choices." "Even if those choices destroy you?" "Even then." She reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. The gesture was bold, public, witnessed by at least 3 other patrons in the cafe. "Rowan, I've spent too much of my life trying to meet other people's expectations, trying to be small enough, quiet enough, acceptable enough. And it was never enough. So I'm done. If Copper Hollow wants to reject me for being your friend, so be it. I'd rather be rejected for being honest than accepted for being dishonest." His hand turned under hers, his fingers curling around her palm. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most foolish." "Definitely both." They sat like that for a moment, hands linked across the table, aware they were crossing another invisible line, but not caring. Around them, the cafe continued its business, but Alara felt the weight of attention like a physical pressure. When they finally released hands, Rowan's expression had shifted to something more vulnerable than she'd seen before. "What if they're right?" he asked quietly. "What if I'm not? What if I can't be what you need? What I need is honesty and respect and someone who treats me like an equal. You've given me all 3. She held his gaze. "As for the rest, Grace Holbrook's lies about your supposed inadequacy, I don't believe them. But even if they were true, it wouldn't change anything. You're worth knowing regardless of whether you can perform to someone else's standards. You say that now, I'll say it tomorrow too. And the day after that." She leaned forward. "Rowan, I don't know what happened between you and Grace. I don't know if her accusations had any basis in reality or if they were pure fabrication, and I don't care. Whatever the truth is, it's between you and whoever you choose to share it with, not the whole town. He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. He wasn't quite hiding. There was some truth to it, he admitted. Not the way she told it, but I was nervous. It was my first time. She had expectations I didn't understand, and when I couldn't meet them right away, she got angry. Made me feel like I'd failed some test I didn't know I was taking. He looked down at his hands. I tried to explain, to ask for patience, but she just got more frustrated, more cruel. And then she ended things and made sure everyone knew it was because I was defective. Alara felt anger flash hot in her chest. That's not failure. That's inexperience meeting impatience and cruelty. Maybe, but the result is the same. The whole town thinks I'm less than a man. The whole town is wrong. She said it firmly, leaving no room for argument. And eventually, you'll prove them wrong. But until then, I'm choosing to believe in you. If that makes me foolish, so be it. Rowan looked up, met her eyes. Why? Because someone should have believed in you 3 years ago. Someone should have told Grace Holbrook to grow up and act like an adult instead of a petulant child. Someone should have defended you instead of accepting her version of events. Alara's voice was steady, certain. I can't change the past, but I can change what happens now. And right now, I'm choosing you. The silence between them was different now, charged with something more than friendship, but not quite named yet. The dance is in 2 days, Rowan said finally. I know. Last chance to back out. Not taking it. You? Not a chance. They smiled at each other, conspirators in their own small rebellion. When Alara left the cafe that afternoon, she felt lighter despite everything. The money troubles, the lost clients, the impending confrontation at the dance. None of it seemed quite as heavy with Rowan beside her. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. And somehow, that made all the difference. The morning of the dance arrived gray and cold, the kind of weather that made bones ache and tempers short. Alara woke early, her stomach tight with anticipation that felt more like dread. She'd faced down Grace Holbrook at the tea. She'd survived weeks of gossip and lost income. But tonight would be different. Tonight would be public declaration in front of the entire town. She spent the morning working on a simple mending job, trying to keep her hands busy and her mind from spinning through worst-case scenarios. Around noon, Catherine stopped by with bread and cheese and a worried expression. You're really doing this, Catherine said, sitting at the small table in Alara's room. We've established that already. I know, but I had to check one more time. Catherine broke off a piece of bread. Grace has been very quiet this week. Too quiet. She's planning something. Let her plan. Alara, Catherine, I appreciate your concern. I do. But I'm done being afraid of what Grace Holbrook might do. Alara set down her needle. The worst she can do is exactly what she's already done to Rowan, turn the town against me through lies and innuendo. And you know what? I'll survive that. I've survived worse. Have you? Catherine's voice was gentle. Because you've never told me what brought you to Copper Hollow, what you're running from. Alara was quiet for a moment. She'd kept that story locked away since she arrived, shared it with no one. But Catherine had earned some truth. I was engaged, she said finally, back in Missouri, to a man my family approved of. Good family, good prospects, everything proper. Except he had a temper, and I was the only one who saw it. Small things at first, criticism disguised as concern, decisions made without consulting me, that kind of control dressed up as protection. Catherine listened without interrupting. I tried to end things quietly, give back the ring, call off the wedding, move on. But he wouldn't accept it, told everyone I was hysterical, irrational, that I didn't know my own mind. His family backed him up. My own family... Alara's throat tightened. They chose his version of events over mine, said I was being dramatic, that every woman got cold feet, that I should be grateful someone wanted to marry me at all. So you left. I left. Took what money I'd saved and just disappeared one night. Came west where his family's influence couldn't reach. Alara met Catherine's eyes. And I promised myself I'd never again let other people's comfort matter more than my own truth. So no, I'm not backing down from Grace Holbrook. Because I've already lost everything once for standing up for myself. Losing it again doesn't scare me the way it should. Catherine reached across the table, squeezed her hand. You're braver than I gave you credit for. Not brave, just stubborn and already ruined. Alara smiled without humor. There's freedom in having nothing left to lose. At 4 o'clock, Martha Brennan arrived with the burgundy dress and a determination to make Alara look like victory personified. She helped with the buttons, pinned Alara's hair into an elegant arrangement that was simple but striking.
This story was posted on the channel The Rusty Saddle. Please do not repost it in any form.
Martha declared. Grace won't know whether to cry or throw something. Hopefully neither. I'd prefer this evening to pass without incident. Martha snorted. You're attending a community dance with the town pariah as your escort. Incident is guaranteed. We're just aiming for controlled incident. Rowan was due to collect her at 6. The dance started at 7, but arriving early meant facing fewer stairs all at once. Strategy, Martha called it. Alara thought it was probably just delaying the inevitable, but she appreciated the thought. At 5:30, Alara was dressed and ready, and so nervous she wanted to climb out the window and run. Instead, she sat at her table and breathed slowly, trying to calm the hammering of her heart. Mrs. Donovan knocked at 6 exactly. Mr. Hale is here for you. Alara stood, smoothed her dress, and walked downstairs on legs that felt steadier than they had any right to be. Rowan waited in the front hall, and the sight of him stopped her halfway down the stairs. He'd dressed for the occasion, not fancy, but clean and carefully pressed. Dark pants, white shirt, vest that brought out the breadth of his shoulders. His hair was combed back, still slightly damp. He'd shaved. And when he looked up and saw her on the stairs, his expression shifted to something that made her breath catch. You look... He stopped, seemed to lose words. Terrified? Beautiful. He said it simply, like stating a fact. You look beautiful. Alara felt heat rise in her cheeks. Thank you. You clean up well yourself. He offered his arm at the base of the stairs. Ready? Not even a little bit. But let's go anyway. They walked through Copper Hollow's darkening streets toward the church hall where the dance would be held. Other couples and families moved in the same direction, most giving Alara and Rowan a wide berth. A few nodded, brief acknowledgments that felt like small victories. Most just stared. How are you feeling? Alara asked quietly. Like I'm walking to my own execution. Rowan's voice was dry. But at least I'll die well dressed. Don't be dramatic. They're not going to kill us. Just make us wish we were dead. Much more civilized. Despite everything, Alara laughed. The sound drew more stares, but she didn't care. If they were going to scandalize the town, they might as well enjoy it. The church hall blazed with lamplight, music already drifting out through the open doors. Inside, families gathered in familiar clusters. The ranchers near the back, the merchants closer to the refreshment table. The town leaders occupying the best viewing positions. The band was setting up on a small stage, tuning instruments and running through scales. Alara and Rowan stepped through the doorway together. The reaction was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. The violin player actually missed a note. Grace Holbrook stood near the refreshment table, Samuel at her side, and the expression that crossed her face was pure rage masked by a brittle smile. She said something to Sarah, who immediately moved toward another group of women. Here we go, Rowan murmured. They moved further into the hall, found a space near the wall that offered some strategic distance from the main crowd. Martha Brennan appeared almost immediately, her husband in tow. You made it, Martha said, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by nearby listeners. And looking spectacular, both of you. Alara, that dress is perfect. Thanks to you. Nonsense. I just provided the fabric. You provide the backbone. Martha turned to Rowan. Mr. Hale, you're looking particularly well this evening. Mrs. Brennan, thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet. The evening's just beginning. She glanced toward where Grace was holding court. But I have to say, the look on certain people's faces when you walked in was worth the price of admission alone. The band finished tuning and launched into the first dance, a simple waltz that got couples moving onto the floor. Established pairs mostly, comfortable with each other and the routine. Rowan looked at Alara, a question in his eyes. Not yet, she said quietly. Let them adjust to us being here first. So they stood and watched. Catherine arrived with her father, gave Alara an encouraging smile. Mrs. Donovan came in with several other boarding house residents. Tom Sutton and his wife, Margaret, still looking uncomfortable but present. Others Alara recognized from around town, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. The second dance started, then the third. Alara was beginning to think they might make it through the evening without major incident when Grace Holbrook made her move. She crossed the hall with Samuel in tow, her smile bright and dangerous. Several other couples followed in her wake. The Pattersons, the Howells, Sarah Holbrook and her husband. A small delegation. Miss Quinn, Grace said, her voice sweet as poison. How lovely to see you here. Though I have to admit I'm surprised you chose to attend after our last conversation. I enjoy dancing, Alara said evenly, and community gatherings. Of course, community is so important, isn't it? Belonging. Grace's gaze flicked to Rowan, then back. Though I suppose not everyone values the same things in a community. Some people are more interested in individual choices, regardless of how those choices affect others. My choices affect no one but myself. Are you sure about that? Grace's smile sharpened. Because I've heard from several merchants that business has suffered since you arrived. That your associations have made some women uncomfortable shopping in town, concerned about who they might encounter. If people are uncomfortable encountering Rowan Hale, that says more about them than about him. Samuel Holbrook stepped forward slightly. Now see here, Miss Quinn, you're new to Copper Hollow. You don't understand the delicate social balance we've established here. When someone disrupts that balance, by having coffee with someone? Alara's voice remained calm, but she felt anger building. By attending a public dance? Those are disruptions? By deliberately aligning yourself with someone the community has deemed unsuitable, Grace cut in. By forcing decent people to either accept your poor judgment or exclude themselves from social events. You're creating division, Miss Quinn, whether you intend to or not. The only division here is the one you created 3 years ago with lies and innuendo. The words came from Martha Brennan, who'd moved to stand beside Alara. Don't pretend this is about community standards, Grace. This is about you maintaining control through fear and exclusion. Grace's composure cracked slightly. I don't have to explain myself to you, Martha. Everyone here knows what Rowan Hale is, what he can't be. I did nothing but tell the truth about what happened between us. Your version of it anyway. Martha's voice carried across the hall now, drawing more attention, which conveniently made you the victim and him the failure. Never mind that you were the one who ended things, that you were the one who couldn't accept that a man might have needs beyond your understanding or patience. How dare you? Grace's face flushed deep red. I dare because someone needs to. Martha took a step forward. You destroyed a good man's reputation to protect your own pride, Grace. And for 3 years this town has let you get away with it, because it was easier to believe your lies than to ask uncomfortable questions. Samuel moved between them. That's enough, Mrs. Brennan. I won't have you attacking my wife. Your wife is attacking Miss Quinn and Mr. Hale simply for existing in the same space as her. If that's not worthy of response, I don't know what is. The hall had gone completely quiet now. Even the band had stopped playing. Everyone watched the confrontation unfold with the horrified fascination usually reserved for disasters. Rowan touched Alara's arm gently. We should go. No. Alara kept her voice quiet but firm. We came here to dance. We're going to dance. She turned to him, held out her hand. May I have this dance, mister? Hale? He stared at her for a moment, understanding what she was really asking. This wasn't just a dance, it was a statement, a line drawn in front of the entire town. It would be my honor, Miss Quinn. He took her hand and led her to the center of the floor, the empty center because everyone else had cleared away, leaving them isolated in a circle of watching eyes. The band looked uncertain until Martha Brennan called out, Well, are you going to play or just stand there gawking? The violin started hesitantly, then the others joined in. A waltz, slower and more romantic than the earlier numbers, Rowan's hand settled at Alara's waist, hers rested on his shoulder. Their joined hands raised to proper position, and then they were moving, and nothing else mattered. He danced better than she'd expected, not fancy, but competent and confident. He led clearly, gave her space to follow, adjusted when she stumbled slightly on an unfamiliar turn. They moved together like they'd been practicing for weeks instead of attempting this for the first time. "Everyone's staring," Rowan murmured. "Let them stare. Grace looks like she wants to set us on fire." "Good." He almost smiled.
This story was posted on the channel The Rusty Saddle. Please do not repost it in any form.
Terrified mostly, but yes, a little bit. They spun through the music, and gradually other couples began to join them on the floor. Catherine and her father, Martha and her husband, a few of the ranch families. Not everyone, probably not even half, but enough that Alara and Rowan weren't completely alone. When the song ended, scattered applause broke out, polite, cautious, but present. Rowan bowed slightly. Alara curtsied. They were about to step off the floor when the band launched immediately into another waltz. "Again?" Rowan asked. "Why not? We're already scandalizing them. Might as well be thorough." So they danced again. And this time it was easier, more natural. Rowan relaxed incrementally. Alara found herself actually enjoying it instead of just enduring. They didn't talk much, just moved together through the music, aware of the watching crowd but not quite caring anymore. When that dance ended, they finally stepped aside to catch their breath. Alara's cheeks were flushed, her heart racing from exertion and adrenaline. Rowan looked more alive than she'd ever seen him, color in his face, something bright in his eyes that might have been hope. "Refreshments?" he suggested. "Please." They made their way to the punch table, very aware that they had to pass close to where Grace and her allies had regrouped. Grace's expression was frozen somewhere between fury and disbelief. Sarah looked scandalized. Samuel just looked angry, but they said nothing as Alara and Rowan passed. Nothing they could say, really, without causing an even bigger scene. Rowan handed Alara a cup of punch. Their fingers brushed in the transfer, and the simple contact felt loaded with meaning neither of them had quite named yet. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for being brave enough to be here. Thank you for making it worthwhile." They stood together near the refreshment table, sipping punch that was too sweet, and watching the dance continue around them. More couples had joined now, the floor nearly full. The evening was settling into its rhythm, and while Alara could still feel disapproval radiating from certain quarters, it wasn't quite as overwhelming as before. Catherine appeared at her elbow. "That was incredible, both of you. We just danced. You just declared war." Catherine's smile was fierce. "And you're winning." "The evening's not over yet." "No, but you've made your point. You're here. You're together. And the sky didn't fall." Catherine glanced toward where Grace was in animated conversation with several other women. "Though I wouldn't turn your back on Grace for too long. She's not done." As if summoned by the mention of her name, Grace separated from her group and approached. Alone this time, which somehow felt more dangerous than when she'd brought reinforcements. "Miss Quinn, a word in private?" Alara exchanged a glance with Rowan, then nodded. "All right." They moved to a quieter corner of the hall, though privacy was relative with so many people watching. Grace's pleasant mask was gone now, replaced by raw anger barely controlled. "What do you want?" The question surprised Alara. "I don't understand. What do you want from all this? From Rowan?" Grace's voice was low, vicious. "Are you trying to prove something? Make yourself feel noble by championing the town outcast? Or do you actually believe you can fix him?" "I'm not trying to fix anyone. I'm just choosing my own friends." "Friends?" Grace's laugh was harsh. "Is that what you call it? You think I don't see what's happening here? You think I don't recognize the look on his face when he watches you?" "What look?" "Hope." The word came out bitter. "The same look he used to have with me, before he proved incapable of being an actual man." Alara felt disgust curl in her stomach. "You're pathetic." Grace's eyes flashed. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. You're pathetic." Alara kept her voice quiet, but let the contempt show. "You couldn't handle that a man needed patience and understanding instead of just performing to your expectations, so you destroyed him, made him carry the shame of your own inadequacy as a partner. And now you can't stand that someone else might actually value him for who he is instead of what he can do for them. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I know what it's like to be with someone who sees you as a failure when you don't meet their arbitrary standards. I know what it's like to have your worth reduced to whether you can perform correctly. Alara stepped closer. The difference is I learned to recognize that kind of cruelty for what it is, and I refuse to participate in it. Grace's hands were shaking. He'll disappoint you. When it matters, when you expect him to be a real husband, he'll fail. And you'll understand exactly why I did what I did. If that happens, which I doubt, I'll handle it with compassion and patience. You know, like an actual adult. Alara held Grace's gaze. But I suspect the truth is you never gave him a chance. You expected perfection immediately, and when you didn't get it, you punished him for being human. You self-righteous little... Ladies, Samuel Holbrook appeared beside his wife, his expression thunderous. I think this conversation is over. I agree. Alara turned away. There's nothing more to say. She walked back to where Rowan waited, her legs shakier than she wanted to admit. He took one look at her face and steadied her with a hand at her elbow. What did she say? Nothing that matters. Alara drew a breath. Can we leave? I think we've made our point for one evening. Absolutely. They collected their things and headed for the door. Behind them, Alara heard Grace's voice rising in anger, Samuel trying to calm her, but they didn't look back. Outside, the night had turned colder. Stars scattered across the dark sky, sharp and clear. They walked in silence for a block, then two, letting the distance muffle the sounds from the hall. Finally, Rowan spoke. What did she really say to you? Alara considered lying, then decided he deserved truth. She warned me you'd disappoint me, when things became intimate, that you'd fail to be a real husband. His jaw tightened. And what did you say? That if that happened, I'd handle it with compassion, but that I suspected the real problem was her inability to offer patience. Rowan stopped walking, turned to face her fully. Alara, you don't have to explain anything to me. I want to. His voice was rough. I want you to know the truth before this goes any further. All right. He took a breath. Grace was my first. I was 23, she was 21. I was nervous, inexperienced, and terrified of doing something wrong. She seemed confident, like she knew what she was doing, but when it came down to it, he stopped, clearly struggling with the words. I couldn't, not right away. I was too anxious, too in my own head, and instead of being understanding, she got angry. Made me feel like I'd failed some fundamental test of manhood. Alara waited, letting him finish at his own pace. I tried to explain that I just needed time, that I cared about her and wanted to make it work. But she didn't want to hear it. She wanted performance, not partnership. And when I couldn't give her that immediately, she ended things and made sure everyone knew why. He met Alara's eyes. So yes, there's truth to her story. I did fail to meet her expectations. But it wasn't because I'm incapable. It was because she demanded something I wasn't ready to give and punished me for being human. Have you been with anyone since? Alara asked gently. No, who would have me? After what she said? His laugh was bitter. The whole town believes I'm defective, and maybe they're right. Maybe I am. You're not. Alara said it firmly, leaving no room for doubt. You're someone who had a bad first experience with someone who lacked empathy. That doesn't make you defective, it makes you normal. You can't know that. Can I? She stepped closer. Rowan, I've spent the last 2 months watching you handle nervous horses, manage difficult men, solve complex problems. I've seen you be patient and kind and strong in ways that matter. If you needed the same patience and kindness in return for something as vulnerable as intimacy, that doesn't make you less. It makes you human. He stared at her, something raw and desperate in his expression. You really believe that? I really do. The silence stretched between them, charged with possibility and fear and something that felt dangerously close to hope. I should get you home, Rowan said finally, his voice not quite steady. Probably, but neither of them moved. Alara. He said her name like a question, like permission being asked. She understood what he was really asking. Yes. He kissed her then, soft and careful and completely terrified. His hands gentle on her face, his breath unsteady against her lips. It was the kiss of someone who expected rejection, who'd learned to brace for disappointment. Alara kissed him back with all the certainty she could offer, letting him know through touch what words couldn't quite convey, that she chose this, chose him, believed in him even when he couldn't believe in himself. When they finally pulled apart, Rowan's eyes were bright with emotion he didn't try to hide. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Good thing it's not about deserving." She smiled. "It's about choosing, and I choose you." They walked the rest of the way to the boarding house hand in hand, not caring who might see. At the steps, Rowan lifted her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Thank you," he said. "For tonight. For everything. Thank you for being worth fighting for." He left reluctantly, looking back twice before turning the corner. Alara watched until he disappeared, then climbed the steps to find Mrs. Donovan waiting in the hall. "Quite the evening," Mrs. Donovan said. "You could say that." Grace Holbrook left early, apparently in tears. Mrs. Donovan's expression was carefully neutral. Her husband had to practically carry her out.
This story was posted on the channel The Rusty Saddle. Please do not repost it in any form.
"For what it's worth, Miss Quinn, I think you did well tonight. Stood your ground without stooping to her level. That takes courage. Or foolishness. Sometimes they're the same thing." Mrs. Donovan smiled slightly. "Get some rest. Something tells me the real battle starts tomorrow." In her room, Alara changed out of the burgundy dress with careful hands, already thinking about how to return it to Martha. She unpinned her hair, washed her face, and sat at her small table trying to process everything that had happened. They'd done it. They'd attended the dance together, faced down Grace Holbrook, and survived. More than survived. They'd claimed their right to exist in that space, to be together publicly regardless of town opinion. And Rowan had kissed her. Alara touched her lips, remembering the tentative pressure, the fear and hope mixed together. He'd trusted her with his vulnerability, his shame, his wounded pride. And she'd accepted all of it without flinching. The question now was what came next, because they'd crossed a line tonight that couldn't be uncrossed. They'd moved from friendship to something more, something that would demand even more courage to sustain. But as Alara lay in bed that night, listening to the wind rattle her window, she found she wasn't afraid. Uncertain, yes, aware of all the challenges still ahead, but not afraid, because for the first time in longer than she could remember, she'd found something worth fighting for, and she had no intention of giving up now. The backlash came faster than Alara expected. By Monday morning, she'd lost 2 more clients. Her count was down to 3 now, barely enough to cover food, let alone rent. A note slid under her door informed her that she was no longer welcome at the weekly ladies' sewing circle. And when she went to Sutton's Mercantile for thread, Tom served her with tight lips and Margaret wouldn't meet her eyes. "I'm sorry," Tom said quietly as he wrapped her purchase. "But Grace Holbrook has made it clear that anyone who does business with you will lose her patronage, and her husband's." "I understand." Alara took the package, pride keeping her voice steady. "Thank you for serving me at all." She walked back to the boarding house through streets that felt colder than the weather warranted. People she'd greeted for months now crossed to avoid her. A group of women outside the church fell silent as she passed, then resumed conversation in urgent whispers the moment she was out of earshot. This was what Rowan had lived with for 3 years. This isolation, this casual cruelty disguised as social consequence. The weight of it pressed against her chest. But when Wednesday afternoon arrived, she dressed carefully and walked to Miller's Cafe with her head high. Rowan was already there, and the relief on his face when he saw her made something tight in her chest loosen. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he admitted as she sat down. "Why wouldn't I?" "Because it's gotten worse. I know it has." He studied her face. "How bad?" "Down to 3 clients, banned from the sewing circle, general social exile." She tried to smile. "The usual." "Alara? I'm fine, really." She reached across the table, took his hand. "I knew this would happen. We both did. Knowing doesn't make it easier. No, but it makes it bearable." She squeezed his fingers. "How are things at the ranch?" tense. Samuel Holbrook came by again yesterday. Tried to convince Mr. Brennan that I was a liability, that keeping me on would cost him business relationships. Rowan's jaw tightened. Brennan told him that he judges his employees by their work, not by gossip, but Samuel's not giving up. They sat in silence for a moment, the reality of their situation settling between them like unwelcome weight. "We can't keep going like this," Rowan said finally. "You're going to lose everything. I've already lost everything before. I survived. But you shouldn't have to, not for me." He pulled his hand back and the loss of contact felt deliberate. "Maybe we should stop. The coffee meetings, the public appearances. Give the town time to settle down. Is that what you want?" "No, but what I want doesn't matter if it destroys you." Alara leaned forward. "Listen to me. I didn't choose you because I thought it would be easy. I chose you because I believe you're worth the cost, and I won't let Grace Holbrook or anyone else make me regret that choice. Even if it means financial ruin? Even then." She held his gaze. "Rowan, I've spent my whole life trying to be acceptable to people who were never going to accept me anyway. I'm done with that. If Copper Hollow wants to reject me for choosing my own path, that's their loss, not mine." He shook his head slowly. "You're either the bravest person I know or completely insane. Definitely both," she smiled. "Now stop trying to be noble and tell me about your week." They talked for 2 hours, longer than usual, about everything and nothing. His work, her dwindling prospects, books they'd read, dreams they'd shelved. When they finally stood to leave, Rowan caught her hand again. "Come out to the ranch this weekend," he said. "Saturday. I want to show you something." "What?" "You'll see." The corner of his mouth lifted. "Trust me?" "Always." Saturday dawned clear and surprisingly warm for late autumn. Alara borrowed a horse from Mrs. Donovan, who'd proven unexpectedly sympathetic as Alara's situation worsened, and rode out to Triple Creek Ranch with directions Rowan had carefully written out. The land opened up as she left town, harsh beauty in every direction. Red rock and scrub grass, distant mountains sharp against the sky. She understood why people fought for this territory, why they stayed despite the difficulty. There was something honest about it, unforgiving, but clean. The ranch buildings appeared gradually, main house, bunkhouse, barns, and corrals spreading across a shallow valley. Cattle dotted the grazing lands, and she could see men working in the distance. Rowan met her at the main gate, and the smile on his face made the long ride worthwhile. "You made it. Your directions were very thorough." She dismounted, and he took her horse's reins. "Come on, I want to show you the operation." He led her through the ranch, explaining the layout, introducing her to horses by name and personality. He showed her the breeding stock he'd carefully selected, the grazing rotation system he'd implemented, the water management that had improved their summer yields. His pride in the work was obvious, and his knowledge was impressive. "You really love this," Alara observed as they leaned against a fence watching a mare in her foal. "I do. It's honest work. The land doesn't care about gossip or reputation. It only cares whether you do things right." He glanced at her. "That's what I wanted you to see. This is who I am when nobody's watching, when I'm not the town pariah or Grace Holbrook's failed experiment, just a man who's good at his work." "I already knew that." "I know, but I wanted you to see it anyway." He turned to face her fully. "Alara, I need to tell you something." Her heart kicked. "All right." "Mr. Brennan offered me a partnership, a small stake in the ranch in exchange for continued management and my breeding program results." He paused. "It's not much, maybe 5%, but it's ownership, a future." "Rowan, that's incredible." "It's conditional. On me staying, obviously, on continuing to produce results, and on—" He stopped, seemed to gather courage. "On him not having to deal with social complications that affect ranch business." Understanding hit her. Samuel Holbrook's pressure. And others. "Brennan likes me, respects my work, but he's a businessman. If keeping me costs him too much in lost relationships—" Rowan's voice was flat. "He'll do what's necessary." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I have to choose. Between this opportunity, this chance at something I've worked toward for years, and you." He met her eyes. "And I'm choosing you." Alara's breath caught. What? I'm choosing you, Chita, he repeated. I'm going to turn down the partnership because being with you, having someone who sees me and values me and stands beside me, that's worth more than ownership percentages or social acceptance or anything else. No. The word came out sharp. No, you're not turning that down. Alara, listen to me. You've worked for this, earned it, and I won't let you sacrifice it because Grace Holbrook is throwing a tantrum. She gripped his arms. We'll figure something else out. There is nothing else to figure out. If I accept the partnership while publicly courting you, the social pressure will force Brennan's hand eventually. It's just a matter of time. Then we make time. Alara's mind raced. We get married. Rowan stared at her. What? We get married. The idea crystallized as she spoke. Right away. This week, if possible. Because an engaged couple is scandalous, but a married couple is fait accompli. Grace can't break up a marriage the way she can undermine a courtship. That's insane. Is it? Think about it. Right now, they can dismiss our relationship as infatuation, poor judgment, something that will pass. But marriage is permanent. It forces them to either accept us or permanently exclude us. And I'm betting most people will choose acceptance over the effort of sustained hostility. You're talking about marrying me to spite Grace Holbrook. I'm talking about marrying you because I love you. The words came out before she could stop them, raw and honest. And because I'm tired of letting other people's fear and cruelty dictate my choices. If we're going to be punished for being together anyway, we might as well be together properly. Rowan's expression shifted through several emotions too fast to name. You love me. Of course I love you. Did you think I was doing all this for entertainment? I don't know what I thought. He pulled her close, his hands framing her face. Say it again. I love you. He kissed her then, deeper than before, all his fear and hope and desperate need pressed into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were bright. I love you too, he said roughly. I have for weeks. Longer, maybe. I was just too afraid to admit it. So we're doing this? Getting married? Are you sure? Really sure? His hands tightened on her waist. Because once we do this, there's no going back. You'll be tied to me, to my reputation, to everything that comes with being Rowan Hale's wife. I'm already tied to all that. Marriage just makes it official. She smiled. Besides, I'm curious. About what? About whether Grace Holbrook was right. About whether you can be a real husband. She said it lightly, but her meaning was clear. Rowan's expression went serious. I can't promise perfection, or even competence at first. I don't want perfection. I want honesty and patience and partnership. Can you promise me those? Yes. No hesitation. I can promise you those. Then that's enough. They rode back to town together, plans forming between them. They'd need a license, a witness, someone to perform the ceremony. Martha Brennan would help. She'd probably be delighted. Catherine, too. When? Rowan asked as they approached Copper Hollow's outskirts. Friday. Give us time to arrange everything, but not enough time for Grace to organize opposition. She's going to lose her mind. Good. Let her. Friday arrived faster than seemed possible. Alara spent the intervening days in a blur of preparation, altering her green dress to be suitable for a wedding, arranging for the license, preparing to move her few possessions from the boarding house to wherever she and Rowan would live. The ceremony would be simple. Just them, Martha and her husband as witnesses, and Reverend Matthews performing the service. No announcement beforehand, no crowd, just quiet determination and love. Thursday evening, Catherine stopped by with a small bouquet of late-season wildflowers. You're really doing this, she said. I really am. Are you scared? Terrified. Alara took the flowers, breathed in their faint scent, but also more certain than I've been about anything in my life. What if it doesn't work? The marriage, I mean. What if Grace was right about his limitations? Then we'll figure it out together. Alara met her friend's eyes. Catherine, I'm not marrying Rowan because I think he's perfect or because I've convinced myself there won't be problems. I'm marrying him because I'd rather face problems with him than face perfection with anyone else. Catherine smiled through sudden tears. That might be the most romantic thing I've ever heard. Friday morning, Alara dressed in her green dress with shaking hands. Martha arrived early to help with her hair, pinning it up with small white flowers tucked into the arrangement. "You look beautiful," Martha declared. "Nervous, but beautiful." "I am nervous. What if I'm making a terrible mistake?" "Then it'll be your terrible mistake to make." Martha turned her to face the mirror. "But I don't think you are. I think you're doing exactly what you should be." They walked to the small chapel together, Catherine joining them halfway. Rowan waited inside with the Reverend, wearing his best clothes and an expression that mixed terror and joy in equal measure. When Alara entered, his face transformed. Pure relief and love and wonder. The ceremony was brief. Traditional vows spoken with voices that shook but didn't waver. Rings borrowed from Martha's collection. Simple bands that would do until they could afford their own. A kiss that tasted like promise and fear and stubborn hope. And then it was done. Alara Quinn became Alara Hale, and Rowan gained a wife who chose him knowing exactly what that choice meant. "We should probably tell people," Alara said as they walked out into the cold November afternoon, now husband and wife. "Probably." Rowan's hand was tight around hers. "Ready for the explosion?" "Not even slightly, but let's do it anyway." They walked to the center of town together, still in their wedding clothes, Martha and Catherine flanking them like honor guard. The announcement spread with predictable speed, whispers becoming shouts, shock rippling through the streets. By evening, half the town knew. By the next morning, everyone did. The reactions ranged from outrage to grudging acceptance to outright support. Grace Holbrook reportedly took to her bed with nervous strain. Samuel Holbrook made threats he couldn't back up. But enough people, more than Alara had dared hope, simply shrugged and moved on. A married couple was harder to scandalize than a courtship, and Rowan's work spoke for itself in ways that gossip couldn't quite override. The first few weeks of marriage were awkward, tentative, and sometimes painfully honest. They lived in a small house on ranch property that Mr. Brennan provided, learning each other's rhythms and needs, learning to be partners in all the small, unglamorous ways that mattered. The physical intimacy came slowly. Rowan's fear was real, bone deep, the product of years of shame and Grace's cruel dismissal. But Alara met it with patience and humor and stubborn insistence that they figure this out together. "It's not a performance," she told him one night when frustration had him ready to give up. "It's just us, learning each other. Nobody's judging except you." "I feel like I'm failing you." "You're not." She kissed him softly. "You're just nervous. We'll get there." And they did. Not perfectly, not without setbacks and awkward moments and occasional frustrated tears, but they got there, finding their way to a physical connection that was messy and real and entirely theirs. When Alara finally felt confident she was pregnant 3 months later, Rowan's reaction was pure stunned joy. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor confirming it." She took his hand, placed it on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." He pulled her close, his face buried in her hair. "I thought, after everything Grace said, I thought maybe I couldn't." Grace was wrong about a lot of things. The pregnancy announcement rippled through Copper Hollow, like vindication. Physical proof that Grace Holbrook's accusations had been lies, or at minimum, exaggerations. Rowan wasn't defective, wasn't less than a man. He was simply human, and he'd found someone who treated him as such. Alara's client base began to recover slowly. Not everyone came back. Some people clung to their judgments like lifelines. But enough returned that she could work again, building towards something sustainable. Mr. Brennan finalized Rowan's partnership paperwork. The 5% stake wasn't much, but it was a foundation. Proof that competence and character mattered more than gossip. Grace Holbrook eventually emerged from her self-imposed isolation, but her power had diminished. People remembered how she'd lied, or at minimum how wrong she'd been. Her carefully constructed image as the wronged innocent had cracks that no amount of social maneuvering could fully repair. She and Alara passed each other on the street one spring afternoon, both pretending not to see the other. But Alara felt Grace's stare, felt the weight of her impotent rage, and she felt nothing but pity. Because Grace would never understand what Alara had learned, that strength wasn't found in controlling other people's perceptions, but in living honestly regardless of judgment. That love wasn't about meeting impossible standards, but about choosing someone's humanity over their performance. Their daughter was born in late summer, healthy and loud and perfect. They named her Catherine Martha, after the two women who'd stood beside them when it mattered most. The christening brought unexpected guests. People who'd shunned them months earlier now offered cautious congratulations. Gifts appeared on their doorstep from families who'd crossed the street to avoid them. The slow, grudging acceptance that comes when a community realizes it was wrong but won't quite admit it. Rowan held his daughter with wonder and fear, this tiny person who existed because someone had believed in him. "What if I mess this up?" he whispered to Alara late one night, watching the baby sleep. "You will, so will I. All parents do." She leaned against him. "But we'll mess it up together, and we'll figure it out, and she'll be loved. That's what matters." 5 years passed, then 10. The ranch prospered under Rowan's management. Mr. Brennan increased his partnership stake to 15%, then 20%. Eventually, when Brennan was ready to retire, he offered to sell Rowan the majority share at favorable terms. Rowan Hale, once the town pariah, became one of Copper Hollow's most successful ranchers, not through social manipulation or inherited wealth, but through competence and determination and a wife who refused to let lies define him. Alara's seamstress business grew into something substantial. She hired 2 apprentices, taught them not just stitching but the value of making their own judgments, of refusing to participate in collective cruelty. Catherine married a school teacher from the next county, someone who valued her intelligence and independence. Martha lived to see 3 more grandchildren, all of whom called her Aunt Martha, regardless of actual relation. Grace Holbrook's marriage to Samuel slowly deteriorated under the weight of lies and resentment. They stayed together. Divorce was unthinkable, but anyone with eyes could see the brittleness between them. Grace aged poorly, her beauty fading into hardness, her influence waning as younger women took her place in Copper Hollow's social hierarchy. She and Alara maintained cold civility. They existed in the same town, attended the same events, but never spoke beyond necessary pleasantries. Alara felt no satisfaction in Grace's diminishment, just a weary recognition that cruelty eventually consumed those who wielded it. On their 15th anniversary, Rowan took Alara riding out to the land that had been their first real conversation, the place he'd shown her who he was beyond the gossip. "Do you regret it?" he asked, dismounting to stand beside her. "Choosing me? Burning your bridges for someone the town had already condemned?" Alara looked at the land they'd built together, thought of their children, their home, the life they'd carved from stubborn hope and defiant love. "Not for a second," she said. "Best decision I ever made." He pulled her close. "Even knowing what it cost you?" "Especially knowing what it cost me." She turned in his arms. "Because what I got in return was worth every sacrifice. You were worth it. We were worth it." They stood together in the fading light, 2 people who'd refused to let fear or judgment or cruelty define their worth, who'd chosen each other knowing exactly what that choice meant, and who'd built something beautiful from that choice. In the end, their victory wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet and undeniable. A life well lived, a family built on honesty and patience, a reputation earned through character rather than carefully managed perception. Copper Hollow never quite apologized for how it had treated Rowan, for believing Grace's lies or enforcing collective cruelty. Towns rarely did. But slowly, grudgingly, it accepted what Alara had known from the beginning, that Rowan Hale was worth defending, that sometimes the people a community rejects are exactly the ones it needs most. And perhaps more importantly, their story became a quiet lesson for others facing similar judgment, proof that reputation wasn't fate, that lies could be outlived through patient truth, that choosing love over acceptance, honesty over comfort, partnership over performance, those choices mattered. Not everyone learned the lesson. Grace certainly never did. But enough people absorbed it that Copper Hollow became slightly kinder, slightly less quick to judge, slightly more willing to question its own narratives. It wasn't redemption exactly, just slow, imperfect growth. Which, Alara reflected as she watched her grandchildren play in the yard of the ranch that bore their family name, was perhaps the most anyone could hope for. Not perfection, just the stubborn, messy, beautiful work of choosing truth over fear, day after difficult day, until eventually truth became undeniable. Rowan found her on the porch, silver threading through his dark hair now, lines around his eyes from years of squinting at distant horizons. He settled beside her, their bodies fitting together with the ease of long practice. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How far we've come. How many people told us we'd fail? We almost did, several times. But we didn't." She leaned against him. "Because we were too stubborn to give up." "Because you were too stubborn to give up," he corrected. "I would have backed down 100 times if you'd let me." "Then it's good I didn't let you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their grandchildren chase each other through the grass their children had played in, on land that had once seemed impossibly out of reach for a man condemned by gossip. The town had moved on, as towns did. New scandals, new dramas, new people to judge. But occasionally, at community gatherings or town events, Alara would catch someone's eye and see recognition there. Understanding that she and Rowan had proven something important, even if no one quite knew how to articulate it. That love wasn't about meeting impossible standards. That humanity mattered more than performance. That choosing someone's truth over society's lies was revolutionary in the quietest, most powerful way. It wasn't the ending anyone had expected when that young seamstress first arrived in Copper Hollow with nothing but grit and determination. But it was the ending she'd fought for, the life she'd claimed through stubborn refusal to accept anyone else's version of what was possible. And in the end, that made all the difference. Because Alara hadn't just loved a man everyone said was broken. She'd proven he never was. And in doing so, she'd rewritten not just his fate, but her own, transforming scandal into legacy, judgment into triumph, and lies into a truth so strong that even Copper Hollow's longest memories couldn't erase it. The sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold. Somewhere in town, someone was probably gossiping about someone else, perpetuating the same cycles of judgment and cruelty that had nearly destroyed Rowan. But here, on this porch, with this man beside her, and the life they'd built spreading out before them in every direction, Alara felt nothing but peace. They'd won. Not easily, not cleanly, but completely. And that was enough.